Well, thank you, DJ HETUG. That was a riveting and fun, exciting beginning to our August 2025 Higher Education Tableau User Group meeting. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a very fun agenda for you, starting with our welcome and announcements, followed by Meet a Community Member with Celia Fryar, who is a Tableau Academic Ambassador. And then Lisa Trescott from Maricosta College is going to lead us through her TC25 encore of 6-step roadmap to impactful visits, followed by our wrap up and chat as usual. So before we get into it, I'd like to invite anyone who has an announcement to come off mute, share your announcement. If you aren't comfortable doing that, you could also put it in the chat. Anything job postings or events that you think might be of interest to the group, we encourage you to come off mute and share.
Hey, Roshni, do you have the slide? Oh, thank you.
All right,
That's great. So yeah, I wanted to let everyone know that HEW, which is Higher Education Data World, is doing 2 events this fall. Every year we used to have a fall training. This year the training is being conducted by Bob Signer for non-invasive data governance. I've taken this training in 2019 and I can say it's a new method and it's a very nice way of learning how to do data governance as well as like some kind of a new way of delivering it to your leaders. So I would definitely recommend that one. It's a 6-hour training broken into 2 days with a lot of discussions in between. So that's one. And then we also heard from a lot of people in spring about doing something for those who are not able to attend the in-person conference in Atlanta. So we are doing a 1-day virtual conference and we are inviting proposals for presentation in it. The original deadline was, of course, 22nd August. But if you can start your proposal and then just email us that you are planning to present and what the topic is, we might be able to extend that to give you more time to prepare for the proposal. We really want some good topics, especially because we were going on surviving chaos in this uncertain time. So hoping for some good presentations to come. And I'm going to be around, so I'll be in the chat if you have any questions too. I can answer that too. Thank you,
That is
Jimmy and
really
Roshni.
exciting.
Yeah,
I know that's going to be a fantastic event.
thank you.
Thank you so much. Did anyone else have any other announcements?
Well, Jenny, we have an announcement. We've got some amazing prizes to raffle off. Sort of as we head back into the school year in this chaotic and uncertain world, we want to help you bring some order. And to do that, we have a handful of Tableau Creator e-learning licenses to raffle off, thanks to the folks at the Tableau community team. So there's 2 links here, 2 QR codes here. We'll put the links in the chat in a second. One to what the prize is. It's a Tableau Creator e-learning license for a year, starting September 1st of 2025 through August 31st of 2026. And if you have a creator license through work, so you're a creator on the Tableau Cloud or Tableau Server site, then you're eligible to enter. We'll do a random drawing after the tag meeting is over, once we actually have the licenses in hand, which hopefully will be this week. But again, they're not available until September 1st. So enter. We'll put the slide up again later in the meeting as well, just to remind everyone to enter to win. And that's it. So I'm gonna pass this over to James.
So you've probably heard about Tableau Next by now. So we have a hackathon that is underway. So you have an opportunity to check it out for free. So the hackathon provides you with a pre-built organization with data, the semantic model, metrics, and a dashboard. So that is, you have everything you need to find some creative solutions to real world problems. You also don't have to go alone on the hackathon. They do allow teams, but that does mean you will have to share any prize money that you win. Now, but even if you don't think you have any shot at win, it's just something that's probably worthwhile checking out. So you don't have to worry about organizing your own proof of concept. You can actually get access right now for free to see everything that Tableau Next has to offer. But as with any competition, there are eligibility rules. And one of those rules will probably eliminate quite a few of us, which is if your school is considered a government organization, you are not allowed to participate. But for everyone else, go ahead and sign up at the link that's provided and use some of these following tools for success. And so you have a Slack channel. So in the Tableau community, there's a channel specifically for the hackathon. Tableau's also provided some instructions and some use cases and some workshops. The first two workshops have already been held, but there are links to recordings at the site. The workshop 3 is next week, and then 4 is toward the beginning of September. So go ahead and go check it out and see what's coming up at Tableau Next.
And Sam, I believe
Okay.
you have an announcement too.
Oh, yes. So the Educator Data Camp resources are available soon. I just checked the Slack workspace and they are still not there, but they did say that they're coming within the next few weeks or so. So hopefully they will be up soon. So this QR code will take you to the agenda that was at Educator Data Camp 2025, and then the resources and recordings will be in that workspace very, very soon, hopefully. And then we have one more announcement. So there are two community projects we wanted to highlight. And the first one is the new Data Changemakers Community Project. So this is co-led by Frederick Ferry of the Brisbane Tableau User Group in Australia. And Data Changemakers is the new version of Viz for Social Good. And so this is a project that focuses on providing a social impact organization with both data analysis and data visualization. And so they're currently partnering with No Kill Colorado, which is a nonprofit dedicated to ending the unnecessary killing of homeless pets. The first phase of this project is to clean the data. So if you want to volunteer to be part of a small group that's going to clean the data, the submission deadline is September 5th. Once that data is cleaned, it'll be released on September 26th, and then anybody is welcome to create a dashboard or Viz for consideration by October 24th. So the details to participate in that are on the website, including the selection process, design preferences, and a lot more. They are going to be showcasing the top projects from the first project that went live this Friday, August 22nd. So if you want to see some examples of what was chosen for the last project, that will be in a live webinar on Friday. Yeah. And then we also have the EduVisors project. So every month there's a new data set on something education related. It's either higher ed, K through 12, global education, student mobile device usage, or a lot more. The data set this month is the 2023-24 suspension rate of California students. And so, and it has a great team of co-leads. So we have Tableau Visionary Dennis Cow, Tableau Forms Ambassador Amy Wu, and Tableau Public Ambassador Meiras Abdoli. And so it's just a great way to practice your Tableau skills on topics that are still related to our work. And then, yeah, Roshni put all the links for that in the chat. Thank you.
And the last thing, geez, so many things to watch and learn and do. So the last thing we have is an update on DataFam Live, which was, I believe it was last month. I don't know, time flies. It was all about exploring agentic analytics. The workshop is now available on demand. And so whether you're an experienced analyst or just starting your data journey, there's a lot that you can learn from the recording to imagine what's next. And if you actually watch DataFam live, this next face may seem a bit familiar to you. Jenny, who am I talking about?
Well, Roshni, you're talking about our Meet a community member for this month, Celia, or Celia Fryar. Um, Celia is a full-time Austinite and part-time traveler, and she recently went to Sydney, Australia to present at Visit Sydney. Lucky you. And you might have also met her at TC25 in San Diego. She is the managing partner of Data Divers LLC and an adjunct professor at the University of San Francisco, and somehow also has time to be a Tableau academic ambassador, blending real world experience with academic insight. Over the past decade, she has taught analytics to over 7,000 learners, helping many of them land data jobs. Outside of work, you'll find her scuba diving. Yes, that's her in the bottom left, or playing piano, or golfing with her sons. I don't know how you have time for all that, Celia. But whether she's diving into data or the deep blue sea, Celia is passionate about making positive impact. So, Celia, welcome. Thank you so much for being our Meet a Community member this month.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very honored by all that. Goodness.
Well, the way this is going to work is we have a list of questions. I'm just going to ask them and you're going to answer them until we run out of time. So let's dive right in.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Tell us a little about yourself and describe your role in your team.
Well, this part of my career has very much been about helping people become market ready or getting to market. And a lot of the education experiences I've been a part of have scoped from boot camps to private organizations to what's happening at University of San Francisco, where I teach classes there specifically aimed at helping people prepare for internships. So, but some of my favorite and where I super enjoy investing in this next generation of young professionals, to be sure. But the bulk of my work has been with young professionals that are making that jump from whatever they're either data adjacent or in another domain where they're not being able to achieve whatever their life goals were, and they're adding a data component. So that's been a collection of SQL, Python, Tableau has featured largely in that, and unfortunately, there's always some spreadsheeting involved because that's how the world works. But to this mindset tool set, right, and then help them get to market in a way where they can apply it and lift the lid on what's possible for them in their career. So it's been really very fun. I started off in more of the coding side of the house, and I love what is happening with this decade of life. So
that sounds like a really rewarding job.
Yeah, it's been great. I really enjoy it.
So what type of data do you work with?
So most of the time I'm working with public data sets and trying to engage especially young learners, even young professionals. So I love micro mobility data sets. It's a kind of one of those universally appealing kind of conversations to have, translates real well into operational analysis. There's a data site called Inside Airbnb that offers extracts, and then I can construct projects with constraints and budgets and real world facets to it for folks to do both the application of, is this a good investment, or should we do this or that sort of scenarios, but then using some real world scraping instead of something that I've something that is completely not artificial. That's not always a bad thing, but something that's more connected to real world and then transferable, so that when people are showing their portfolios, that it's easier for employers to imagine them doing that for them. Right now, also a big chunk of my days is spent with enterprise clients, so it's their internal data. I feel like I'm jumping from one data set to the next, and it's their internal stuff, and really getting a fresh dose of how much we need to improve on the data governance, data cleaning side of the house. And Tableau prep is figuring largely in what I'm spending with my time with now. But it's been an interesting challenge to do more with enterprise side and see where we're at with data governance, business rules being clearly defined, all that sort of thing. And especially as I've been participating with Tableau Next to beta, and very aware of how we're going to really need to double down on data governance to make the concierge and all that the LLMs there, all the promise of that to really be successful for folks. So,
yeah, that's really exciting. All the new stuff coming around the bend.
Right.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about how you use Tableau at work?
So academically, I'm trying to be preparing when I'm preparing someone to go to market. I'm looking at a way to help Tableau be a large part of how that they make insights quickly, easily accessible, um, uh, and then also present it to them in a way where kind of any of the difficulty side of it, be it the terms or the navigation, some of that getting started stuff that's dissimilar to like Excel, which seems to be a common starting part for everybody, just let it sneak up on them, because after they get past some of those initial words and frameworks, it's just such a deep, rich product and has such universal appeal. And so I use it to try to make it user friendly and then make the complex sound easy. And yeah, that is very much it. And then trying to help enterprise clients with the bespoke kind of trainings. Also, how do we get the maximum impact here? Monday, I was talking with somebody about this cohort analysis, and it was a bunch of people that had never used any of this sort of technical. They considered themselves completely non-technical. So, but they were lit up over cohort analysis. So just trying to help them see how even though we were talking about parameters and parameter actions, that it's just very simple. We just need to connect these parts of the puzzle together, so that's how Tableau and I are trying to help it and make it happen for people.
Mhm. Do you have a favorite Tableau project that you've worked on?
So this is probably a little different answer than what the question is intended to be, but yes, I do, in fact. So a lot of my projects have revolved around cohorts that were put together to help people move from where they are to where they want to be, right? So there are three particular, as I was considering this question, three particular cohorts that really stand out. And honestly, we're informed by a lot of the rest. But in Q4 of 2019, I got to go to Saudi Arabia, and people had to qualify to be in the classes. It was just a fantastic experience. I worked in Riyadh and Medina, and just to have witness such a shift in cultural norms, and for them to welcome a Western woman into the classroom as a lead instructor, and then to watch these young minds be grappling with questioning data, and it seems like that was just such a fresh and a beautiful experience. Following that, in my top favorites would be in Q3 of 2020, I got to work with General Assembly was one of the bootcamp companies I've worked with, and they partnered with Microsoft and Humana, and we reached into a group of people who had been selected to go through the program in Kentucky, and largely unemployed folks who grew up without a lot of that tech stuff in your backpack. And we were upskilling them to get into jobs that were offered by Humana as long as they were successfully. We were creating the program as we're flying it, right? So this quarter-long program to get them to market with data skills. And then the final one that is similar but different was the winter of 23 to 24. I got recruited to go to the University of Bahamas and live and work there, and then help a group of folks you had to be native Bahamian to come into the class. And we were building the program as we were flying it again. And my classroom was full of cooks and policemen and firefighters, and they all wanted to be involved in tech in a more meaningful way. Some of them reporting, like there was a guy wanting to do the reporting for the police stations, but most of them were also just wanting to have more of a technical component to their income potential and such. And that sounds really fancy, but the reality of it is the hospitality is kind of the name of the game and the limiter in that environment. And we were so blessed because not only was someone recruiting and supporting me being there, that we had both on the political side and on the business side, there were people standing by, ready to go to invite those graduates into doing internships. So that was that partnership from, someone bringing the skills to training side in, and then someone administering it with some strength of sway with their influence. And then the business community standing up and receiving people was just really remarkable to be a part of that experience, for sure. So
amazing.
Yeah, those are my favorite projects for sure.
Sounds like your job never gets boring.
Lots of variety. If I needed same, I'd be in trouble, but I really do love the variety and the challenge of it all. So if you can make a difference in somebody's life, that goes a long way toward any irregularities or frustrations that go with it. It makes it all just super worth it. So that's really and truly what motivates me. So
Definitely. So how long have you been using Tableau and how did you learn how to use it?
great question. So I recharacterized this last night because I became familiar with about 2011. So version 7 or 8, somewhere in there. And I definitely was a proofreader and a scoffer, to be fair. I come from the coding background. Okay. And then by 2013, I was a collaborator and a reviewer. And then by 2016, I got invited to be a teacher of it. So it was part of the trio of tools I was teaching on a regular basis. By 2020, though, I'd been invited by DataCamp to make 3 different courses for them and for their platform. And that's where I really mastered it, because it was the goal always had been for someone to complete the course and be able to be close to being able to be prepared for their desktop certification. But that course was marketed as, when you go through these tracks, you will be prepared for desktop certification. And the trick was they had to use Tableau Public. But, some of desktop certification back then, of course, required data connectors that didn't exist in public, especially back then. But that was where I really crawled through Tableau in a way that was all the ins and outs and what would people do, not only what would students do to do it wrong, but also what needed to happen to really prepare somebody to go sit for that certification. And then this year has been about cloud for me. I definitely has mostly taught from desktop, but the majority of my hours are spent on cloud now, and in cloud migrations and the fallout that comes with all that. So not fallout, but the transition, and then also with that Tableau Next. So that's been my journey with Tableau, and I'm so grateful I got to be a part of this season of life with Tableau, and it's been great, and especially this year being involved in the data fam more thoroughly with the ambassador program.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite Tableau feature?
I do. The 3 that I can only 3, but Pages Shelf, I love data in motion. I know it's not necessarily the most popular one on the planet, but it is literally one of my very favorites, especially with the attention span of folks these days. If you can put your data in motion, be a Pages Shelf or some other way. I've also seen it make one of the things that sold me on it was back in about 2012. I saw inside of an organization a decision that was, they're having all kinds of words being exchanged to make a decision happen. And then it was a scatter plot in a Pages Shelf that made it happen. I'm thinking, wow, okay. So I love putting charts and tooltips. So you have a beautiful graphic and you have the meat that people need to feel secure about the numbers popping up there. I feel like that's an underutilized tool as well. And then parameters and parameter actions recently have just really revolutionized some of the recommendations I make, especially on dashboards. So those are my favorites presently.
All good choices.
Thank you.
What do you want to learn more about with Tableau?
So I'm definitely digging in deeply with Tableau Next and Concierge and trying to do some reconciliation between doing the same thing in Tableau desktop and then over in Next, and then also reconciling numbers between the 2 platforms, and then investigating some lines of thought, like what is looking at net sales, so using Superstore with the fact that you have to take into account your returns. So compounded questions, looking at market basket analysis under the guise, the old classic thing of big losses on table and that's in the East. Well, what else was bought with that? Did the overarching sale justify that discount on that one item? And so that's what I'm doing right now in terms of Tableau Next. The MCP lane chain thing, if I could just carve more time, I would definitely be diving into that because that's on my radar for sure. But those are at the top of my list right now.
Mm-hmm. Is there one thing you wish you could go back in time and tell Tableau newbie you?
I've heard this from a couple of colleagues as well recently. I wish I had emphasized more getting involved with the Makeover Mondays and the Workout Wednesdays or whatever form existed in those years, because when you take something that someone else has done, I took what Lisa did for Makeover Monday in February and recreated it myself. and asked her about 15 or 20 questions in the background because it was such an elegant thing she'd done with the Makeover Monday, and then presented it and trying to encourage others to do much the same in a March tug in Austin. That's such a great learning experience, and it keeps you engaged, and it also helps you take your game to the next level, your techniques, your tooling, your appreciation for what's possible, the art of the possible. And I feel like when you're getting started, you need to do something to, encourage yourself to improve your techniques, and then also to like see what's out there and see what's possible. So otherwise, we're just all going to take the tables out of Excel and recreate them in some other BI tool, and that's really not it, right? So and very, very underutilize the tools, so especially Tableaus. So that's what I would, get involved in the community, do those challenges. Apply. Recently, we hosted the 2 Iron Viz winners, one for student, one for the national one this year, international one this year, and both of them talked about enter the competitions. You'd be surprised. There's less competition than you think, and it's just such a good refining process. So that was unexpected to hear from them. Yeah, so those are the things I would say. Somebody new.
Mm-hmm. I think that's all good advice.
Appreciate that.
Do you ever use Tableau outside of work? And if so, how?
So I have used it and supported its use, and not as much as I wish because the data is really hard, but I'm very concerned with reef restoration and ocean conservation. And as you would imagine, the budget for having great data collection is really tough. A lot of it's handcrafted. And so there's variances from, how this person collects the data versus that one. But there's been improvements over the last 5 or 6 years, especially on the capture methodologies. But that's where those organizations in the places around the world where they will let a person who's not there local all the time participate, and I volunteer time, advice, whatever it is that they'll, wherever they meet them on the road, wherever they are, and try to offer something. This presently I'm having conversations with some people out of Cayman about the lionfish data that they've collected over the years, because there's some things that are avoidable, some that are not, but whatever it is, we just need to be more, I feel like we need to raise awareness on the health of our oceans, and because it's all part of how we function as land dwellers, so, to be fair. So anyway, that's what I do.
Nice. Well, is there anything else you would like to share with us today?
I'm really keen to talk for a second about the Iron Viz process that's coming up again, and how that we, as a part of the ambassador program, they asked for volunteers to be judges, and I volunteered and got selected. I was thrilled with this and didn't have any idea what I was getting into, but it was such a refreshing experience. And if you want to go to the next slide, this slide shows you just for last year, there's a multi-step process that everything goes through. And the part of the reason I wanted to, and I was great that these guys would let me mention this to y'all, you guys should jump in and participate, because I was surprised there wasn't more. But in any case, there were 253 submissions total globally. And the team at Tableau then did that pre-qualifications, and that side of it wasn't necessarily fully disclosed, so I'm not sure what to say about that. But they did some completion of checking whatever the initial requirements that are posted on. We ended up with 191 eligible entries. They selected 15 judges, and then as we went through it, each one of us, so the pre-team did their review, and then the judges that I was one of the members of, we each reviewed 15 workbooks, okay? And each workbook was reviewed by at least 3 other judges. And if the numbers were tight on them, they would have additional iterations. And then that got it down to the 10 that were the top 10 in January. And you may recall that Andy Congreve and his colleague, they did a live webinar where then they also then announced the top 3. And so it's a very structured approach that comes to, they gave us these rubrics, not knowing what I was getting into. It's a very complex rubric. I mean, I look at rubrics all the time because of being a professor and doing things with certified environments where there's standards and state level certifications and stuff that are part of it. So this is most certainly not subjective. But the couple things I would offer is they very much are looking at how much of what you did is done in Tableau as opposed to like imported from Canva? Did you, like if they pick a theme like this, I would like, and let me just comment about this slide and then we'll move on to I actually am sharing a link with, that's my favorite one that came across my desk. So there will be a pattern similar to this year again. And so last year, the submissions closed at the end of October. And then we had this period in mid-November to mid-December to do the judging. And then they took it internal and then got it to, tallying up all the rubrics and numbers and deciding about any additional judging that needed to be done to split any, ties. And then they came to the final 10, right? And on about the 14th, they announced the top 10, and then the top 3 went to conference, right? And we all got, if you haven't seen that, there's videos of that was top notch. And keep in mind, it's not just did you build something great in the final round of it, it's also a timed process. So they have to be able to rebuild it in that timed process on stage with all the sound and excitement. So it's mental strength on multiple levels, right? But so the viz that I wanted to share with you guys today is called Coffee as Entertainment. You may recall, if you were aware of it last fall, the entertainment was the theme, and they actually published a data set for people to be able to use. And then along with that, they gave an opening for anybody who wanted to use their own data set, but they required them to also come through and discuss why it was entertaining. So I felt like this one was really notable in so many ways. As a person from Japan who's made this submission. Now, as a judge, when you receive a submission, they have removed the name, so you don't know who it is. So it's all anonymously reviewed. But okay, so there are multiple parts of this that on Tableau Public are not quite as interactive as what you will see. If you download it, you'll see even more interactivity. But this person did a really good job of like a solid treatment on coffee beans, different parts of the world, so the importing, exporting. There's a filter right there in the middle that you can select. There's tooltip inclusion. There's this very interesting, I'm not even sure what to call that kind of chart. Maybe one of you guys can tell me, but that's representing these different quadrants out of this countries that are in the band. But it's very creative. Yeah, Roshni, I think so. But like it's there was a nice mixture, and if you click on one of those countries I think you might have to be into X. Yeah, there we go. Let's see the tooltip inclusion, one of my favorites. So even though I hate pie charts, but the bar charts and all, but the person really went next level to try to like be visually engaging and then also provide the detail and facts to back it all up. And to have it segmented between importers and exporters. But this is just the taste test that gets you involved. So then below here, I don't know if it's a man or woman, but a person created this interesting hierarchy about how the beans are cultivated over the earth. Again, all within Tableau. Each of these pieces, I could see the worksheets that were going with it. And then some international comparisons I thought were tastefully done. And the final component is the last bit at the bottom. If you keep scrolling, if you click on any one of these menu options like Irish coffee on that menu there, the cup fills and it feels proportionate to with the components that are required for that. And especially having spent the time to see how Lisa's Valentine's item, this is a lot of really cool things that are happening here to make this possible, and just such a nice way to articulate her messaging or his messaging without it being just static. And I did see in this year a real big trend toward these sort of infographic one-page scrollers as being a real common way for folks to handle dashboarding these days. So I don't know what folks like are the guys on the Big Book of Dashboards would say about that, but that is most certainly a trend and what came across my desk for sure. So yeah, this was a lot of fun, and just wanted you guys to be encouraged to jump in. Right. Yeah. Long form biz season. Correct. Lisa. Exactly. Yeah. So it was a delightful experience and just such an honor to get to jump in. And then was really surprised at the level of detail that they attempt to invite everybody into. And then, and it's 3 big sections of what you're looking at, because it's not just, is it lovely? Is it all made in Tableau? But it's also then what about the analysis? Is there so what there? Is how hard do you have to look to fetch that? And then there's a design quality component that's part of the rubric. And then the third part of the rubric is storytelling. Did they tell a story throughout? And especially with this year, that year being entertainment, the person needed to sell that it was entertaining to drink coffee. And I felt like the person did a really good job of that. So there
Well,
we go. Oh, and there we go. It's rushing. Yes, about accessibility in mind. Right.
Having been a barista for 9 years, I definitely appreciated this as your dashboard spotlight.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it was entertaining to me anyhow. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And if anyone is interested in being our Meet a Community member in the future, then fill out our form and let us know, because we would love to have you. And Celia, thank you again for being our Meet a Community member today.
Yeah,
and
thank you. Thank you for the conversation. It was very fun. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll turn it over to Sam to introduce our presenter today.
So I am very excited to introduce Lisa Trescott. She is a research analyst over at MiraCosta College, where she supports the efforts of the college's student equity and achievement programs. She's been using Tableau since 2017, and just 4 years later, in 2021, she was the Iron Biz Global Champion. She currently co-leads the California Community College's Tableau user group, which is a wonderful Tableau user group, along with the Tableau Public user group, which is also an amazing group. She's also a Tableau Public ambassador and a Tableau Visionary. And that QR code up at the top will take you to her Tableau Public page, so you can see all the amazing vizzes that she's created. And yeah, we're very excited to have Lisa here to present her 6-step roadmap to impactful vizzes. So thank you, Lisa.
Thanks for having me, Sam, and your other tug. Let me share my screen. I think someone has to stop sharing. There we go. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay. Well, thank you for that introduction, and thanks for having me, HETUG. I'm excited to be here with you all today to walk through my 6-step roadmap for creating impactful vizzes in Tableau. And this is the remix. It's the higher ed edition. My TC presentation focused primarily on like my Tableau public profile, so a lot of more creative vizzes, but not this one. This is going to be completely focused on dashboards that I have made at work at MiraCosta College. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you. Thank you all for being here. I'm always really honored and grateful when people choose to spend time listening to me present. So I appreciate you being here. I'm going to skip my intro slide because Sam just introduced me, but hello, I am Lisa Trescott, and we will continue to move on. I do just want to mention that all the resources that I mentioned in this presentation are going to be linked in a blog post that you can grab here in this QR code. And I meant to grab the link before so I could put it in the chat, but I have forgotten. Roshni is usually really good about that. So hint, hint, maybe she could throw it in the chat for you all, just so you have a list of all the resources I talk about in here. And you can, I'll put it up again at the end of the presentation as well. So before I jump into the first slide, just a bit of a trigger warning, because I feel like it's going to strike a little bit of fear in the hearts of the analysts here today. So you've been warned. It is a blank Tableau workbook. And I don't know about you all, but this can be really overwhelming to me because it represents a blank slate. And blank slates, as we know, hold infinite potential. And with that comes infinite pressure, right? Pressure to answer the right questions and analyze the data and make the right charts and tell the right story and then make it all look really beautiful with your design. And all of these choices I find can be a bit daunting, right? But if you have a process in place, a 6-step process perhaps, to start transforming this, a kind of scary blank workbook can become more of an exciting blank canvas. So today I'm going to walk you through my process and show you how do you go from here to somewhere like here, or here, or here, right? These are all examples of dashboards I've created in MiraCosta. They are very different from the vizzes that I put on Tableau Public, but the process I'm going to walk you through today applies to your work dashboards, your Makeover Mondays, your Iron Viz submissions, anything you're working on, you can apply this process to. So let's hit the road, right? Buckle up. We have 6 steps to go through on this road trip. And the first step in my process is getting to know my topic. This probably sounds obvious because I'm more or less saying you should know what you're talking about, but you should know what you're talking about, right? How many of us have jumped in to the data before we really familiarize ourselves with the topic, right? I've done it, and those vizzes and dashboards are so clearly ill-informed, right? They don't answer the right questions because I didn't know the right questions to ask, right? So the more time you invest in getting to know your topic, the more informed your exploration and analysis of the data will be. All right, you'll know what kind of questions to ask. You'll know what leads to follow in the data if you spend time here. So for me, this looks like a lot of research, right? I spend a lot of time up front getting to know my topic, spending a lot of time researching it because I always want to make sure I understand the context which my data is in, right? I research trends, historical, current, future. Things change in higher ed all of the time. So it's important to make sure that you understand what's going on, especially legislatively, right? There's a lot going on in this area right now if you're in the US. So knowing and understanding those things is important when you start to analyze the data and eventually go on to talk about it. Higher ed also uses a lot of jargon and acronyms, right? ACPs, DE, FAFSA, DSPS, EOPS, CTE. You are swimming in alphabet soup all of the time. And many of us have likely been in higher ed for a long time, but I don't know about you, every time I start a new project, I work with a new program, or I even work with a new population, there are more acronyms, right? Somehow we come up with more. So make sure you take the time to educate yourself here so you know what those acronyms and all the jargon is. You also want to make sure you know industry standards, right? You need to understand how success is measured in higher ed. Like, what are normal trends that you'd expect to see? Then you're going to know what appropriate goals and benchmarks to set, right? You probably don't want to set a goal that 90% of your students complete a FAFSA when the national average is 60%, right? So make sure you understand those things. I also talk to a lot of people, which I know, I got into data analysis because I don't like to talk to people, right? I like to sit behind my computer and analyze my data and be done. But you can't do that. You have to talk to people in your area and in your industry because I don't know about you, but how many of us work somewhere where knowledge isn't written down, right? It is passed from person to person. I'm willing to bet it's probably everyone on this call. I've never actually worked somewhere where everything I needed to know was documented, right? I don't even know that dream job exists, right? So you have to talk to people, especially subject matter experts, right? Which at work is typically your coworkers who have been there longer, or maybe who work in an area that you haven't worked in yet and you need to buff up on. Because ultimately you want to become an expert on any topic that you work on. And even after 8 years at MiraCosta and in higher ed, I still spend time here. And depending on the project, I spend a lot of time here. We have new initiatives all the time, right? There's always something to learn. I recently started working with financial aid data. And I, no joke, spent over a month on this step because there was just so much to learn. And hopefully you're one of the lucky ones. You've never had to worry about financial aid data. But for those of you who have, know why this took me so long, right? Just to get to the point that I even felt comfortable to move on from this phase. And I'm still learning, honestly. There's just so much in financial aid. At this point in your process, it's also really important to know who your audience is for your dashboard, right? Knowing who you're presenting to allows you to focus on their needs, right? Because different audiences have different needs, right? They have different levels of data literacy. They need different levels of information, right? So knowing what information your audience needs, like in their hands, to make decisions, right? To understand a problem, take action, can really help you focus on key data points that matter to them, and then ultimately craft your narrative when it comes time to tell your data story. And speaking of the data, let's get to know our data too, right? You need to know, you want to probably jump right into your data, right? I know when I get a new project, I get really excited. I'm like, oh, financial aid data, let's go. You have to pump the brakes. You need to spend time understanding what's in your data before you start analyzing it. And so for me, first and foremost, I like to know my data sources, right? Where is the data coming from and how is it collected, right? The way data is collected often affects its reliability. It affects the underlying structure and kind of what the data will look like, right? You might have application data, which looks very different than survey data, which looks different than service level data and enrollment data, right? When it's possible, I will try to walk through the process of data collection, right? I've gone through our student application to see what the student sees, to see the page logic and data validation. I've actually physically walked over to departments on campus to look at their different check-in systems and see what a student sees and they go through, right? I've sat with a counselor and watched them enter data for their appointments. You also want to know how all that data is governed and maintained, or sometimes if it's governed and maintained, right? Who are you going to go to if you see something strange? And you're going to see something strange, right? None of our data is perfect. So you need to know who's governing this data, who's maintaining it, and keeping an eye on it. And then also what business processes occur around the data, right? I just mentioned financial aid data. I challenge you to find a data set that has more business processes around it in higher ed, right? There are grants and loans and scholarships and vouchers and fee waivers, and they're at local and state and federal levels, right? They get dispersed by checks, by direct deposit, by vouchers, by waivers, right? All that money is given out at different time points by different people. And all of those processes and decisions about the data affect what I finally see when I open it up in Tableau. Ultimately, you never want to stop questioning your data sources. The more you know about the journey the data took on its way to arrive at your desk, the more equipped you will be to evaluate and understand it when the time comes to analyze it. You also really want to get to know your variables in your data. If you can get your hands on a data element dictionary and learn it inside and out, that's going to be your gold standard. But as I just mentioned, we often don't have things written down and documented for us, right? So you might need to do a little bit of legwork here to find out how things are defined, right? Because even some obvious variables can have different interpretations, right? Oops. If we're talking about, student age, is that age at the start of the semester? Is it at the end of the semester? Is it at the start of the academic year? Right? Even something as basic as age needs to be defined. You also need to know your data types, right? Strings, integers, dates, they all behave differently in Tableau and store different meaning. You want to make sure your student IDs are stored as a string and not numbers that you're aggregating, right? Things like that, it's important to key in on. You also want to know expected ranges for your variables. This is going to help you know primarily if there's an issue in your data, if you have outliers or things like that. I recently worked on a project with our student services where I was showing the time and days of the week they serve students. So the expected time range that I had was based on their hours of operation, in that service department. So imagine my surprise when a whole bunch of students were getting services at midnight, right? When they're not open. It turned out the timestamp was in UTC time, which is 8 hours different from Pacific time where I am. So make sure that you aren't, just blindly analyzing things and throwing the data up on a screen for them. Make sure you're questioning it. You're keying into things like an odd range that you see or things outside of ranges to make sure that everything is making sense. And then with variables, you do need to know what you have, but you also need to know what you don't have, right? You need to know what you can and can't deliver to a stakeholder. You never want to be in a meeting and tell someone, yeah, I can conduct that analysis or I can get you that information, and then get back to your desk and look at the data and realize, no, I can't, right? It's not a good look. I've been there, right? We want to avoid that at all costs. So really get to know those variables. And then as analysts, we often work with multiple tables. I know I can't remember the last project I worked on. It only had one table. So make sure you know how all of them relate to each other, right? Those primary and foreign keys are going to be paramount when it comes to joining up your data sources. One wrong join, you can arrive at some really inaccurate analyses and results. Same thing about knowing the level of detail of all your tables, right? That's going to be really important. And what I mean by that is, what does one row represent in your data, right? Is it a class? Is it a section? Is it a student, right? You have to know that. Otherwise, you're going to end up with inaccuracies, even if all of your calculations and everything else is correct. So what I find a good way to get the lay of the land is when it comes to your data is to just grab a few rows. I will often do this in Tableau Prep just take a few random rows and then literally walk through each one of the columns, each variable, to make sure you understand what each one is telling you, right? What a blank represents versus a null, right? Just so you get to know it really, really well inside and out. And then once you get to know your data, it's time to move to step 3, where we can actually start looking at it, right? It's time to analyze and find our story in this data. I'm not going to teach anyone to analyze data here. I think you all probably have that skill set. So I'm going to talk about how I analyze data with a storytelling in mind. And with that, I pretty much start every single project just by generating a list of questions. So these can be fact-based questions, how many students enrolled in this course. They can be more relational, right? Is there a trend between enrolling in this course and graduating on time? It could be more comparative, right? How do older students compare to younger students when it comes to, X outcome? At work, most of these questions are generated by my stakeholders, right? And my end users. They are typically coming to me because they have a question they want answered, right? But I always spend time sitting down with whoever's requesting a dashboard and ask them, okay, what question do you want to answer with this dashboard? And what are you going to do with this information, right? Because that's really going to guide your analysis, and it's going to guide the questions that you ask, right? A lot of times people will ask a question, but it might not sync up with how they want to use the data. So getting an understanding of their needs is going to help kind of guide the project. And then once you have that list of questions that they want to answer and that you want to answer, I start to add, getting ahead of myself, I start to add my own as well, right? Questions that I think are going to add clarity or maybe better answer something that they've asked, right? To get at the root of what they're trying to examine and accomplish with this data. And then those questions are going to be your guide, my guide, to explore the data with a purpose, right? They really give you a lens to look at the data and then follow it where it takes you, right? I will a lot of times start off with one of my questions trying to answer it and then end up answering something completely different. And that's okay, right? You got to take that detour and follow the data where it takes you, because that's how you ultimately tell the story of your data rather than trying to kind of fit your own narrative onto the data. You're likely going to uncover outliers as you start to explore this data. And I'll be the first to admit, I don't like outliers, right? They're really annoying. They mess up our pretty charts and our averages. And I know a lot of times we want to hide them or just ignore them, but don't do that. When you come across kind of surprising things or outliers, make sure you investigate them and dig deeper. They could be issues in your data, or they could be really interesting use cases where you're going to find a really great story in your data. So I want to take you through an example list of questions, what it might look like for a project. So this is one that I had on a recent project, and it came from our food pantry. They wanted to know about utilization of our food pantry. And one of the questions a stakeholder had was, what's the busiest time at the food pantry? And when I asked them, okay, well, what are you going to do with this information? They said they were going to use it for scheduling their staff. So that helps me then develop and add my own questions to kind of get at the root of that, to find the data that's going to help them the most. So that was their question. But like I said, I always add my own questions. So I added how many students get served in total and each month, and even down to each day. Maybe there's something going on, like, the second Tuesday of the month is really busy, right? I wanted to ask, do different weekdays have different traffic patterns? Are Fridays and Mondays really slow and the rest are super busy? I wanted to know about the different locations, right? Which location is busiest? Do they all have the same traffic patterns? Because we had several locations for our food pantry. So then again, these questions guide the analysis. They give you a place to start to answer, when is the food pantry busiest, right? And some of these questions didn't really go anywhere, or they didn't show anything that would help the program determine staffing needs. And like I said, that's okay, right? As you go through and answer these questions, you'll start to uncover what things you want to show to help tell the story of, in this case, food pantry utilization. And so this is the dashboard that I ended up developing for this project. That first question is answered right up top, right? How many students are served by month and day? So there's a band for the total along with the trend right next to it, to highlight the busiest and slowest months. You can see October isn't so busy, so probably don't need to staff up very much then, but they better be at full capacity in April, right? Because that's a really busy month. There's also a calendar to get at that, how many students are served each day. but it's hidden. It's a pop-out calendar because it didn't really reveal anything all that helpful in terms of staffing needs, which is why I didn't put it front and center. It's not part of the main story, but it is probably information that they might ask at some point. It's supplemental, so I'll still give it to them, but it's not right there. It's not part of that main story. You know, the other question, do different weekdays show different traffic patterns? That's answered down here in this heat map on the bottom. And we can see, yeah, Friday definitely does. That is a slow day. You probably don't need all your staff that day. But all the other days are pretty similar, right? In that they're busy from 10 to 1, and then things kind of start to taper off. And then last, you know, about the locations, which one's busiest. You can see in the bar chart up here where the busiest location is. It's highlighted a different color to say, hey, Oceanside food pantry is where you really need all your people. And then that second half of the question, do different locations have different patterns? If I were to click on this one, you see, yeah, there is kind of a different pattern, right? 10 and 11 is still pretty busy, but then rest of the day is pretty chill. So make sure you have people in that 10 to 11 spot, and then maybe scale back. So develop those questions, find what pieces of the story you want to tell, and then it's time to decide how we want to visually convey that story with our charts. When it comes to charts, the name of the game is iterate. You want to make as many charts as you possibly can to figure out what part of or which chart is going to showcase your data the best, right? You want to resist the urge to just use the first chart that comes to your mind because it might not be the best chart for the job, right? If you were buying a new car, you probably would not go to the dealership, test drive one car and buy it, right? No, you would probably test drive a lot of cars, right? You might have something in mind that you want, and you might want to test a bunch of cars in that, in that room. If you want a sedan, you test drive 10 sedans to find out which one best fits your needs and is going to work for you the best. So I'm going to show you an example of some charts I iterated for a recent project when I was asked to show how many students are moving through a particular course sequence, right? So I needed to see how many students start in the course, pass the course, enroll in the next course, and then pass that course as well. So I started just throwing the data together in a bar chart just to see what it looked like, but that felt a little comparative, right? I thought that might not be right. I tried this kind of bubble chart where the circles were sized according to the number of students, but I try to avoid using circles to convey meaning. They're kind of hard to read and understand. I also tried this kind of sequential donut series, but then I remembered I don't like donut charts. It didn't feel like it visually conveyed things kind of intuitively. I tried an area chart. I kind of like this, but I wanted it to look more like a funnel. So I did a dual axis, but the horizontal funnel made the labels kind of weird. So I switched the axis, but then I was like, well, this takes up so much room. And also having the dual axis is very duplicative. So I went back to a single axis and felt like I was kind of getting there. I kind of had more of a funnel-y look, but I felt stuck, right? So I did what I always do when I'm stuck. I go see what other people have done, right? And so when I did that, I went on to Tableau Public and I found this viz, which is by Janelle Mar-Lim, and coincidentally was viz of the day yesterday. So very coincidental. And this is one of the examples that they had in that viz to show funnel, right? A funnel of data. And I gravitated towards it because it was kind of a combo of a lot of the charts that I had test drove. So I tried it on with my data and I really liked it, right? This is where I ended up. I liked the funnel aspect. The bars kind of added this visual delineation for each milestone. There were bands on the left-hand side to kind of give the big numbers. There's space to add context and label things appropriately to let people know what each one was. And so it's easily understood. And I do just want to reiterate, I got here because I went looking for more examples, right? If you're stuck and you're not sure what other kinds of charts to test drive, go browse, go see what people have done to help you brainstorm, right? You can do that on Tableau Public. Some folks like Andy Kriebel and Ken Flairledge have chart catalogs on Tableau Public. I also really like this data viz catalog. It's not a Tableau tool. It's just it's just a chart catalog. And the reason I like it is it has this feature where you can search charts by their function. So if you click here, you'll see these different categories that show charts for comparing things, right? So showing trends, distributions, and all these different categories will show you a bunch of charts that fit that function. So that's one thing I do when I'm stuck. I also find that it's helpful to remind myself, what question was I even trying to answer with these charts? Because I think we can often forget what the initial question was when we're in the thick of things and kind of in the weeds. And in the case of the charts I've been showing you, the stakeholder asked me, and this is a direct quote, I copied it out of their email. It said, how many students make it all the way and pass English 201? Can you show it starting with English 100? So then going back to the charts I iterated, one didn't really answer that when I kind of reminded myself, what's the question? And it was this one, right? I realized, well, you know what? I can nix this because it only kind of answers that question. It's more about the percent of the total population that goes through the course sequence and showing the drop off, which is similar, but it's not exactly what the faculty member wanted here, right? So I also nixed it just because I found it hard to compare. It's donuts. So it was kind of a double whammy against this chart. But this one definitely is a lot clearer. The funnel answers that question. It shows the starting points, how many students are making it through the sequence. And I did put things like the percent and the drop off in the tooltip so the user had them, but the main chart kind of answers that main question. One other thing to keep in mind as you create and select your charts is that charts should support the analysis in your story. And what I really want to caution you against here is using non-traditional charts at work. I know they're eye-catching, they're fun to experiment with, but a lot of times they can actually obscure your story and make it more difficult for your users to see, right? And on Tableau Public, you might make kind of an eye-catching, eye-candy chart, but at work, I would say they're never the right chart for the job, right? Your users are coming to your dashboards to get quick insights. They don't want to hunt for data in some, complex radial chart. Because if they have to spend too much time trying to understand the data, they're just going to leave and they're going to go away with nothing, right? So simple charts done well are almost always going to be your best choice. You might not be as excited to make more bar charts as you might be to, experiment with viz extensions, but your users are going to appreciate it if you kind of rein it in and use charts they understand. This also gets back to making sure you know your audience as well, right? Knowing their data literacy needs. In higher ed, we're often catering to a very wide spectrum of data literacy. So making sure that someone with kind of the lowest level of data literacy is going to understand ensures that everyone is going to understand your dashboards and get the information that they need from them. Okay, I hope you still have gas in the tank because the next step in the process is design, and it's a bit of a doozy. I'll say up front, design is an entire presentation, right, in and of itself. There's no way for me to cover all the things about design in this presentation. So I'm just going to kind of talk about the broad components of my design process and share a few resources and tips for each. So the very first thing I do with design is I start every project by looking for inspiration. I will browse Tableau Public, Pinterest, Behance, just to kind of find design styles and concepts that I like. And then once I find something that I want to emulate, I steal it, but I steal it like an artist. So this means, yes, draw inspiration from other people's work, but don't just directly copy it, right? Find something that you like and then make it your own, right? Put your own spin on it. So for example, this is a dashboard that I saw in Tableau Public by Varen Jain. And I thought it was really nice. It's really clean. I liked a lot of the formatting choices that they made. I like the charts and kind of the way everything is shown. So I use this as inspiration for this dashboard, right? Where you can absolutely see the inspiration, right? Especially kind of the formatting of the headers and some of the chart construction. But it's not straight copying his work, right? I'm not taking his dashboard and trying to pass it off as my own. There are elements that I've used as inspiration, but I've put kind of the Miracosta spin on them and made it more my own. So that's what I mean by go find inspiration, but then kind of give it a spin and make it your own. Okay, now it's time to wireframe. So you want to make sure you're mapping your route before you hit the road because it's going to save you a lot of time and keep you from making a lot of wrong turns. This is a very quick and dirty step for me. I don't like to spend a lot of time here. I keep it super simple, right? I use all placeholders. So I never put real charts or real data into anything. I don't even use color. I just get a quick sketch out, right? So I like to sketch things. It doesn't matter if you like to sketch or if you want to use a tool, right? Excalidraw is good. Figma, I know some people use Miro. Doesn't matter what you do, just make something because this is going to help you plan things out. And it's going to help your design come together more quickly once you get into Tableau. So this is actually the wireframe for the dashboard that I just showed you. So you can see it's nothing fancy, but this sketch became this. right? Just having that sketch allows you to kind of get a sense of how things are going to look before you get into Tableau. Because trust me, it is much easier to move things around on a sketch than it is to move around containers and charts in Tableau. So always, always, always kind of sketch things out and figure out how your layout's going to go before you jump into Tableau and lay it out. Okay, next up, I'm going to talk about aesthetics. So this is essentially how your design looks. There's a lot that goes into aesthetic design. Again, no way for me to cover everything about aesthetics. I'm going to talk about the main things that I think about here at work, which are color, your text and your font, and your icons. And then I'm going to give a couple of brief examples of each of these. So with color, I personally think this is the hardest thing to get right in data viz, right? When we use color effectively, it's the most powerful tool we have to kind of draw people's focus and attention. But there's just a lot of places where we can veer off course when it comes to color. And the most common place that I see people veer off course is by using too much color. So make sure you're using color sparingly. Okay, here's an example of a chart that uses too much color, right? This is a line chart that I like to call colorful spaghetti. It's definitely a chart that I made early in my time at MiraCosta because I didn't know. But even though I've told the user here what I want to focus on in the title, I've told them the story. I said success in math has decreased since COVID and success in English has increased. Knowing that, it is still really hard to find that story in those lines because there's too much color, right? You have to find math in the legend, find English in the legend, map them back onto the chart, and then kind of follow the trends while you're distracted by all these different colors. If we use color a little more sparingly by coloring only those subjects that are part of the story, and then everything else, all those other supplemental subjects are in gray, it's a lot easier for the user to find what I want them to, which again is math is success is decreasing and English is increasing, right? Everything else is grayed out because it's not part of the main story. So with that gray, it helps kind of make everything else pop. Something that I recommend you do in your dashboards at your institutions is pick 2 colors. I know it sounds like nothing, 2 colors only from your brand and use those as your highlight colors. Everything else should be gray. Right. So what that looks like at MiraCosta is we have all these brand guidelines and they gave us, you know, all these different color swatches based on the little swoosh that's in our logo. And so as a department, we decided let's use this blue gradient that they provided us. And then we took that dark blue and that bright blue and made those our look here colors, right? Look here with the dark blue, look here with the bright blue. When I don't care if you look somewhere, if it's supplemental information, it gets grayed out, right? Most of my dashboards at work are 3 colors, these 2 blues and gray. And then the other thing what's important to do with your color is you want to make it meaningful and be consistent with that meaning. So in this chart that I just showed you, we have assigned meaning to orange and blue, right? We've told the user orange means something is increasing or decreasing and blue means it's increasing. So you don't want to turn around and do something like this in the same dashboard, right? You want to keep it consistent so that your user doesn't have to relearn that color palette every time they see it. And I would also go a step further and say you should keep that meaning consistent across dashboards. So like that dark blue and that bright blue, dark blue usually means something is doing well and bright blue usually means something is not doing well, right? So even so that when people come to your dashboards all across your institution, those meanings are always the same and they don't have to think too much about it. And then lastly, when it comes to color, I always want to make sure I'm focused on using accessible colors, right? Colorblind friendly palettes in particular. So I will avoid stoplight colors, right? Red, yellow, green, because red and green color blindness is one of the most it is the most common color vision deficiency. Because if you use these colors, this is what it looks like to someone with red-green blindness. And that's not going to be interpretable if you use color to apply meaning to your data. It's also best practice to double encode things so your user isn't just relying on color alone to understand your data. So adding symbols, shapes, size, length, line patterns, labels, any visual cue in addition to color to help your users gain meaning over and above color. So like I said, I would avoid these colors, but sometimes you might be in a situation where you have to use them, right? Maybe they're part of your brand colors, right? I meant to look this up before this presentation, how many institutions have red in their brand, because it seems like so many colleges and universities do. So if that's you, and you have to use red, there is kind of or green, there is a nifty trick you can do with a parameter where you put your user in the driver's seat and allow them to swap color palettes. So let's say your brand might not be very colorblind friendly. Give them a colorblind friendly option and switch back and forth so that a user can interpret your data without, with using that colorblind friendly color. Okay, next up, let's talk about text, because text is interesting. It is part of the aesthetic design, but it's also part of the functional design, which means your user needs the text to gain meaning from your data and understand your viz, which means they have to be able to read it, right? So here I want to focus on, you don't want to make your text too small. Like itty bitty text is really hard to read. You don't want to make it too light. That also plays into that accessibility of colors, making sure you have some contrast there. And you don't want to get too cute with your font, right? Here's a case where we're letting design really trump accessibility. People aren't going to spend time to try and read a font that is difficult. And speaking of font, you want to make sure you find an appropriate one, right? It's important to find one because your font sends a message beyond just what your words say, right? When you're selecting a typeface, you are crafting a narrative and you're influencing how people experience your dashboard, right? So you wouldn't want to use, let's say, Comic Sans for a serious topic because that's really out of sync with the story, right? With what you're trying to convey. So make sure you're picking a font that supports your story, supports your analysis. And in a work setting, at work, I pretty much only use sans serif fonts. So these are things like Arial, Tahoma, Verdana, even the Tableau font is sans serif. They're really clean, they're easy to read, and they're also very accessible. So that would be my pointer, is to stick with a sans serif font. It's also helpful to establish a font hierarchy or a text hierarchy. You've probably all seen an image like this before. And you're like, oh, Lisa's over here reading my mind. I'm not a mind reader. This is not magic. It's just a text hierarchy, right? And these are important in design because they really help you guide your user's attention, right? You can guide your user from the most important things by using these large, bold fonts, and then use smaller, lighter fonts for more supporting information. Hierarchies also help establish just a nice sense of organization to your dashboards, and using them kind of helps people, synthesize the information in manageable chunks, right? It helps them digest it more easily and with a lower cognitive load. Okay, so moving on from fonts, let's talk about icons. When I use icons, the main thing I think about is using consistent styled icons. There are a lot of icon libraries out there for you all to pull from, and they are all going to have different styles, right? You will see different stroke widths, kind of these thick or thin. You will see filled and unfilled icons, and you will just see a whole jumble of different styles where some have color and some have color and outlines and some are just a singular color. Doesn't really matter what type of icon you use. Just make sure they're related. Make sure they're all from the same family, because if you start using a hodgepodge of icons, things are going to start looking a little disjointed. Right, you want to make sure there's cohesion in your viz. And same thing what I mentioned about color is keeping things consistent. I would, again, choose icons and use them consistently across all your dashboards at your institution. So, the home button on one dashboard is the same home button you use on another dashboard. You also want to make sure you use icons sparingly, right? An icon is something that's going to draw focus, and anything on your dashboard drawing focus away from your data, you don't want to use too much of, right? You don't want to saturate your dashboard in icons. So make sure you're using icons very purposefully and intentionally. And then you also want to use familiar icons, right? You don't want to get too cute. Don't get too creative when you're picking your icons. Use ones that people recognize, that they're familiar with, so that they know what the icon is going to do, right? They should be intuitive, so your user isn't having to think too much, right? That's the ultimate goal. You don't want people to have to think a lot, right? If they see a home button, they need to be confident that it's going to take them to the home page, right? So make sure that you're using very familiar icons. Okay, our dashboards look good now. Let's turn to functionality, because function is definitely part of the design process. And in this case, I'm thinking more about user interface and user experience, or UI and UX, right? You want to make sure buttons and navigation and all that interactivity, kind of all those touch points, are intuitive and clean. Right? right? This is mostly about the inputs that your user is going to use, right? Are they clicking? Are they hovering? Are they using a drop down? How are they navigating through your dashboard to get information? And what I tend to think about here is how can I elevate functionality, right? These are some of the basic inputs you might have on your dashboards, and they are fine. They do the job, they work, but sometimes you might want to give a little finesse to your functionality. You might want things to be a little more seamless or formatted to your brand or your college or in a specific way to just make it a little easier on your user. And that's where I will start to kind of customize things. So here are some examples. Here I'm using a button to change the two views here. I could have just used Tableau's default thing, drop-down menu, but this was a little cleaner. You're also seeing a custom drop-down menu here, which I did that for formatting, right? I had all these main categories on this dashboard that had subcategories that were nested, and I wanted the formatting to be intuitive. I couldn't really achieve that using kind of this default drop-down menu that Tableau provides. So I made my own, right? You can also use buttons. Here's a button switching a chart between success and retention rates, right? So just having your user click instead of having to use the Tableau version, and also just making it a little bit more on brand for you. Here's a toggle, right? This is a toggle switch, including and excluding emergency grants from this chart. So just all these little changes to functionality can really go a long way in terms of design. And I actually have a whole workbook on Tableau Public and a blog post to show you examples of how you can elevate that functionality. So if you're looking for maybe somewhere to start or ways to elevate your functionality, this is a great place to go just to get ideas and inspiration and learn how to do it in your own workbooks. And then the last thing I want to mention is clutter. Clutter is the nemesis of data visualization. Every element you put on your chart or your dashboard should have a very clear purpose. A good rule of thumb is to ask yourself, if I take this away, can my user still understand it? And if the answer is yes, you chuck it, get rid of it, right? The goal here is you want to reduce cognitive load. So when you remove all that extra clutter, like grid lines, redundant labels, text-heavy descriptions, when you add white space, all of those things help your data breathe and allow people to digest it in an easier way. And then throughout all of these design components, I'm always thinking about kind of one overarching thing, which is, does my design support my analysis and my story? That's really the ultimate goal when it comes to your design, right? Design should be part of the story. It shouldn't distract or detract from the data. So all of your font choices, your color choices, all those aesthetic decisions that you make and the functionality, that all should be in line with your analysis and your story that you're trying to convey. So our dashboards look beautiful now. Let's turn to everyone's favorite step, 6. Let's get feedback in QA, right? I'll say I did put this at the end, but it's also really good to get feedback throughout your process, especially if you get stuck on something, right? I've lost count of how many times I've sent charts to my fellow analysts and I'm like, hey, which chart is better here, right? Always ask for feedback just to get a second pair of eyes. So do that throughout your process, but always leave room at the end just to get that final round of feedback in QA, because fresh eyes are going to catch things that you're just too close to see. And when it comes to feedback, I usually try to get this from multiple groups, right? I will always send a dashboard to another analyst on my team, but I also like to send my dashboards to our admin assistant, right? She's not particularly steeped in the data and the Tableau world like we are, right? She has a much more of a layperson perspective, which is really helpful because it's not just analysts who are looking at our dashboards, right? So having someone outside the Tableau world provide feedback can be enormously helpful when we are catering to a lot of different audience with different levels of data literacy, which we often are. I also always show my dashboards to my stakeholders before I really publish them. And I urge them to give me feedback, right? Because ultimately, the dashboards we make are not for us, right? They are for other people. They are for our users. We need to make sure that they work for them, because if they don't, they're not going to use it and you just wasted a ton of time. One thing I do want to say, though, is I think there's a bit of a misconception about asking for feedback, and that's the idea that you have to take it because you asked for it. Not really. You're in the driver's seat here. This is your dashboard and reflection of you and your work. If someone gives you feedback and you don't agree with it, or you know it goes against best practices, don't feel like you have to take it. Now, I say that knowing that your boss might give you feedback, you might have to take that feedback, right? You might have to do that. Or if 5 people are giving you the same piece of feedback, please don't ignore that, right? They're warning you, hey, you're going off a cliff here, right? So consider what they're saying and be willing to, incorporate their advice. And then you just want to do a round of quality assurance. You want to make sure your analysis is sound, right? Have another analyst go under the hood and check it all out. Have them check your calculations, right? Make sure everything is working before you put it out there for the world, right? All the nuts and bolts, right? Filters, parameters, actions, tooltips, navigation buttons, right? Are they navigating where they're supposed to go, right? You don't want typos or grammatical issues, because if you publish dashboards and users see issues like a typo or a navigation button that doesn't work or a filter that's not applied to all the sheets, they're going to lose faith in the data really quickly. And that is the last thing we want to happen, especially when you have put together such a beautiful and impactful dashboard with this 6-step process. So we've made it to the end of the road, and you are ready to drive off into the sunset with a process to use the next time you open that daunting blank Tableau workbook, and you need to turn it into an impactful dashboard. So thank you all so much again for being here, and big thanks to the Higher Ed Tug for having me today. I can't see the chat when I'm sharing my screen, so I'm going to unshare and see if there are questions or if anyone wants to come off mute to ask anything. I'm happy to answer anything now.
So we are actually running short on time, but
Yeah,
we
now
will
that I
be
stopped
opening up. We will be opening up the breakout rooms in just a minute. But in the meantime, don't forget, we do still have a raffle. So if you want to enter, the links are in the chat. I'm going to pass this over to James to close it up.
Thank you. So whether you want to tell us how perfect our meeting was today, or whether you have suggestions on how we could improve every aspect of it, please fill out our survey form and then jump over to the user group site to register for our next HETUG meeting, where you will learn more about me and the Media community member. Jen Snyder returns to share some tips on pivots, and Jan Lee shows you how to use data scaffolds to unlock insights. And if you would like to see your name or the name of someone you know in a future What's Next announcement, please fill out the Present at HETUG form. And then finally, while you eagerly await our next meeting, check out some of these other tugs. So we're Tableau Public. We'll be featuring or putting a spotlight on the Sports Biz Sunday community project just in time for the start of the college football season. And the Analytics tug, Steve Wexler would tell how to show survey data in Tableau. And finally, our own Rashni will be, again, presenting her accessibility, her presentation at the accessibility tug, which I have to say, she seems to have presented that everywhere. So that's probably have to be one of the most requested, I think, TC25 presentations there have been.
So fun fact about the accessibility tug version, it's actually not the presentation. It's what we're calling the deep cut. So a little bit of applying some of the same concepts from my TC talk for Tableau dashboards, applying it to slide decks and memos and other types of documents where you might also share data, but not in Tableau dashboard form. So very excited about that.
Well, so thank you for our speakers, Celia and Lisa. Thank you for everyone else for attending today's meeting, and we'll see you next month.